Hi and welcome. Why did I say hi twice? Welcome or back to the Switch Show. I am your host, Malisa Chinoye, and it's bittersweet because this episode is bittersweet because we are about rounding up our series, our longest series yet on the show. I don't think I'm going to do a 10-part series. I don't know why I said yet. I don't think I'll do a 10-part series again. This I think this was for a particular reason, and some of the things I've said here or I've discussed here are things I think will stand the test of time. And if somehow down the line, along the line, in the future, I not if somehow when I know more, and I think there are things or there is something that needs to be added. I think there is an addendum to what has been said that is crucial to whatever topic has been discussed over the course of this series. I will make another episode in the future talking about it. But for now, and I think for a while, these episodes will suffice. At some point, when I started it, everything was more of an exposition and an exhortation, if you will. It got to a point I started saying it's an investigation. And I think that should have been the crux of it from the beginning. This isn't meant to replace your. I think I've said this before a long time ago, and I felt the need to say it now. My podcast is not meant to replace your devotion. It's not meant to replace your fellowship with God. It's not meant to replace your sermons, right? If this is a sermon to you, if you see this, I want to say it's not a sermon, but I'm not the one to decide that. At the end of the day, God decides that. Because I will say that my episodes are not sermons. They are curated like sermons, definitely, and curated like every other podcast that is out there. So it's not a sermon. I'm not intending it to be a sermon, but if it achieves that purpose for you, and some way down the line it may achieve that purpose for me, then that's completely fine. Yeah, so like I said, this is bittersweet. We're coming to the conclusion of this. I am both thrilled, excited to forge ahead. The funny thing is that I already have a slate of episodes already thought out. We are already thought out. Immediately after this, the 10th part, part 10 of this series. That is episode 110. 111, we're talking about service. So we're not getting off of the train completely. We're still going to hear some of these things because, like I said, this is a society and culture podcast. I've spent it's society and culture. It's supposed to be faith, society, culture, but there's no classification like that if you want to put it in a box. But I don't think you can. Anyway, it's a faith, society, and culture podcast. So I want to talk about everything, right? Everything. And I'm still learning, I'm still growing. This podcast is more or less a diary of my growth. If you listen to an episode that was released in 2020 compared to a 2026 episode, I am almost certain that you'll be able to tell the difference between 2020 Malise and 2026 Malise. Having said all of that, today we're talking about Jesus. We're talking about Jesus. Christianity is not Christianity without Jesus Christ, right? The reason we are called Christians is because thousands of years ago there were men who walked with Jesus, listen to him, listen to the apostles that walked with Jesus, and they started to exemplify a life consistent with what Jesus taught, what Jesus preached, and how Jesus was. And in Antioch, this is something that a lot of Christians are familiar with. In Antioch, they coined the name Christian. I want to assume that it wasn't actually the word Christian, but a word that meant Christ like translated to mean Christian, and that is why we are now Christians, and over 2 billion people in the world identify as Christians, denomination or not, denominational or not, right? But the foundation of Christianity is often overlooked. It's often reduced to debates. Was Jesus a real person? Did he do the miracles he said? I'm not here. This episode isn't really an inquiry into the miracles of Jesus. I have an episode on miracles already in this series, so definitely go and listen to that. This episode is not an inquiry into the deity of Christ. There's an episode on the Trinity. Go listen to that. This episode is more of an investigation or an inquiry into the historical accounts of Jesus. I have a document of about 10 pages. I don't think I'll satisfy this. I don't think I'll read through everything. But I'm going to pick a few things. Right. I don't have a script. Okay. I don't know if you know. You probably know, but I use scripts. I started using scripts a while back. I didn't used to. When I started, I would just, yeah, kind of was. I'd research something, write down a couple points that qualifies as a script, but sometimes I'll just wing it. Right? I have the idea. I know what I want to talk about. I keep it short and sweet, and we go from there. So I'm going to read a little bit about Jesus Christ, about him. Jesus of Nazareth was a Jewish preacher whose life and death are arrested by multiple ancient are tested. I said arrested. Are tested by multiple ancient sources. According to the Gospels and early Christian writings, he was born in Bethlehem of a peasant family, Mary and Joseph, and grew up in Nazareth, a small Jewish village in Galilee. He trained as a tekton, meaning artisan, likely carpenter, under his father Joseph. Around this is a debated time period. Around 26 to 28 AD, he began a public ministry, teaching in Galilee and surrounding regions, proclaiming the kingdom of God, healing the sick, and attracting a band of disciples, merry men. His reputation spread, provoking opposition from Jewish leaders and Roman authorities. Ancient sources agree that Jesus was arrested in Jerusalem at Passover, tried first by the Jewish council, Sanhedrin. In case you've seen Sanhedrin in the Bible before, it's the Jewish council, and then handed to the Roman governor Pontius Pilate and executed by crucifixion on charges of sedition. So, what sedition is an uprising, a rebellion against an instituted authority, particularly government, right? Why this? Oh, I'm kind of rushing into my next one. Let me give you guys time to breathe. Oh, that was good. I actually needed that. But there are a couple things that are important to note, right? It says Jesus was born to a peasant family. I think one of the things we always thought was if Jesus was rich. The Bible, and I think very intentionally, doesn't talk about Jesus's affluence. Only talks about his influence. There's a difference. Influence, of course, refers to affecting people's lives in a way that they change the way they act or behave or how they do or what they do. I don't think there's a how to do. Yeah, anyway. But affluence refers to wealth. Refers to wealth. Yeah, to put it simply, refers to wealth. So the Bible wasn't particular about Jesus's affluence, but his influence. And we see that in the Gospels. Majority of what was cited about Jesus was his life, was his ministry, the teachings, and his miracles. Nothing about whether he had money. If you even remember the place where he wanted to pay tax, and he told Peter to go into the mouth of a fish and pick out a coin and pay tax for himself. Somebody that had money, like was buoyant financially, he would not need to go into the mouth of a fish to fish out a coin, if you catch my drift. Anyway, he would not need to go into the mouth of a fish to take a coin. So in a way, it suggests that he wasn't rich, monetarily speaking or financially speaking. At the same time, it says that he trained as a tecton, which is a carpenter. And if you watch the Passion of the Christ is absolutely one of my favorite movies of all time. One of my eight. I think it's a beautifully told story. And this is not even, of course, I'm Christian, so I'm biased towards it because, Christianity and whatnot. But if I took away my bias for a little bit, it's a beautifully told historical movie. It talks about a man who, from a secular point of view, Jesus is viewed as a legend who influenced people so much that they believed so much in his message and they were willing to die for it. The extent, the commitment to which Mel Gibson and Jim Caviezel, the commitment that they put to make that story as authentic as possible, I applaud them. It's a beautifully told story. But there's something powerful I want us to see, and it points to Jesus being, the Bible not mentioning his affluence and focusing solely on his influence. Right? Isaiah 53, I'll start from verse 1. Who has believed what he has heard from us? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he grew up, this is talking about Jesus, for he grew up like a young plant and like a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look to him, and no beauty that we should desire him. The first time I came across this scripture was quite recently, actually. Maybe I've heard it before in the past, I don't know, but understanding it was quite recently. I was listening to a sermon and my pastor was talking about how it is that Jesus wasn't in his for a lack of a better expression, in his glory form. You know how, oh my god, I don't know if this will land well for you guys, but forgive me. You know how hey, what's this thing? Name is I'm not an anime avid anime watcher, so you guys will forgive. To whoever is listening to this and loves anime, forgive me. You know how, let me use One Piece. I've watched live action now, so I think I can use it as an example. When you see Monkey D. Luffy, a boy in this red, what is it, the red monkey jacket or just a red jacket, blue jean shorts, wonky looking shoes, and a straw hat, you don't really think that there's anything to him until, maybe I'm spoiling this for someone, spoilers, cover your ears or skip a couple seconds. The first episode of the live action, when he boards Alvida's ship and they fire a bullet at him, the thing bound, instead of piercing through him, it stretches his skin backwards because his skin is made of rubber. He ate the gum gum fruit and he fires the bullet back. Nobody would have known that Luffy could do anything like that, right? So that's a very loose example. What I'm trying to pick from that is that nobody would have known that Jesus was God. No, yes, he declared himself as God. He often alluded and pointed to messianic verses in the Old Testament and said that these things were referring to him. He even went one further, and dropped the coldest line, arguably coldest line in the Bible, and said, "Before Abraham was, I am." I think when I was analyzing that line, he didn't say before Abraham was, I was. I want you to think about it. He didn't say before Abraham was, I was. Say before Abraham was, I am. He's talking about consistency. I did when Abraham did. I still did today and I go did tomorrow. Say continuous thing. And permit me to say it's an everlasting thing. You get it. You get it. You get it, right? But there was nothing that was particularly impressive about him. There was nothing that was particularly impressive about him. I would often say that if we knew what Jesus looked like, we would probably idolize his image, and that's most likely true. There's a reason why we don't know what Jesus looks like, and it's explained here in Isaiah. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, or no beauty that we should desire him. Of course, people say, "Oh, Jesus na fine man now." I mean, if I'm created in the image of God, and after his likeness, see me now, I'll be fine boy, I'll be fine girl. I'm a fine girl. Of course, Jesus na fine man. Cool. We don't know that. Unless, okay, yes, God is beautiful, so of course, Jesus in human form is a beautiful man. Beautiful. It does say here that he was of no beauty that we should desire him. So he wasn't a particularly impressive looking person. He was just this Jewish teacher with, let's say, long hair or long, flowy, curly hair. And he just preached a simple message: believe in God and you will be saved. You can't be saved by your works. You can only be saved by putting your belief in God and the one whom God has sent. Believe in me. So, in a way, it points to, I want to use this to link to something else, to our, do I say our desire for celebrity or to being celebrities, right? I think that celebrity is a consequence, it's not a reward. It's a consequence, right? We see where in the Bible people would gather to see Jesus, and the Bible would say Jesus withdrew himself because he knew men. Oftentimes he withdrew himself because it was not time and they wanted to have his head, right? But other times it also said that he withdrew himself to pray, to fellowship with his Father. And that makes me understand that celebrity is not a reward, it's a consequence. And what that consequence will look like for anybody depends on how they take it. I'm not a celebrity. I'm saying this now, and I hope that if I become a celebrity in some shape or form, internationally or locally, that it doesn't get to me. Because it's easy. It's easy for the notoriety that comes with celebrity to get to you. Jesus, honestly, could have rested on his laurels, and that is why it's important to know that he was 100% man, 100% God, right? If he was a fraction lower, maybe 99% God, of course it's not possible. It's not possible for him. If, however, he was 1% lower of God, 99% God and 100% man, that 1% man, that 1% advantage that man has over his godliness would have imposed heavily on him. So his divinity balanced out his humanity, if you would allow me put it that way, right? Let's examine further. Let's examine further. Primary historical sources: the Synoptic Gospels and John, Paul's letters, Josephus, Tacitus, Suetonius, Pliny, etc., provide overlapping but sometimes conflicting details. The reason why it's conflicting is because um, some people can't seem to agree on certain things like the nativity, like his virgin birth, and that's okay. I think that's okay, but it's a core tenet of Christianity. There's no way you can really prove it. We've seen. I saw a video recently. I don't know if everybody has seen that video, where there was a scientist talking about how they examined the blood off of a shroud. I think the shroud of Turin or something else, and they found out that the blood had 20 to 24 chromosomes instead of 46, right? 23 from the mom, 23 from the dad. I had 24, 23 from the mom, or 23 female and one male chromosome, which I think is fascinating if true. It's fascinating if true, right? So let us journey more. The core facts: Jesus. The core facts of everything is that Jesus was born and was raised and lived in the Galilean region. He was an itinerant teacher, and he was crucified under Pilate. And it's supported by Josephus, by Tacitus. Tacitus was actually Roman. Josephus is Jewish, so we can you could say, he's a Jewish man, so he buys into the legend or the myth. But Tacitus has no reason to write about Christ, but he confirms that Christus suffered execution under Tiberius by Pilate. It's important to note that Pontius Pilate was a governor, like they call them prefects, was a prefect over the Jerusalem area under the rulership of Emperor Tiberius. Okay, that it's important if you want to know a little bit of history. I think history is fascinating. I think it is, and just a segue. I don't think we can do properly historically accurate accounts of the Bible. I say that the Passion of the Christ is one that I applaud so much because of its, deep historical accuracy, and how much it pays attention to the details that were exposited in the Bible and other historical documents, right? I also think that there's a limit to that. For example, if you were to talk about the church in Corinth, if we were to do a whole series as it was in the day, there are a lot of things we will not be able to behold. Think about it. Some of the people Paul was evangelizing to, the Gentiles, they were steeped in idol worship. And if Hollywood is any true, it means that majority of the time you would have to be confronted with sheer nudity in public while preaching the gospel. I don't think that would qualify as a Bible movie again if you have to put sheer nudity. You won't definitely will not call it. No Christian is going to say, this is a Christian movie that I can watch with everybody, right? So there is a level to the accuracy of history that we can pull off on the screen, and also for the sanctity of our minds. We cannot be exposing people to nudity and say, oh, we are trying to be historically accurate. Are you okay? What's your problem? The Romans, all of their Colosseum affairs and everything, if the gladiator and Spartacus and friends serve as any indication of what life used to be like back then. But anyway, water under the bridge. Yeah. So some key information. Mark's gospel is the earliest. I think we know this now because more information has come about. It talks about Jesus's Galilean ministry, miracles, conflicts, crucifixion, and Passover, emphasizes Son of Man titles. The next written gospel was Matthew's gospel, Mark was written around 65 to 70 AD, and it said that Jesus died around 33 AD. So Mark was written about 32 years after Jesus, just over 30 years after Jesus had been crucified. And then Matthew was in 80 to 85 AD. Adds the infancy narrative, birth in Bethlehem, according to Micah 5:2, fulfilling the prophecy in Micah 5:2. Flights to Egypt, the Magi portray Jesus as the Davidic king. Then Luke's account around the same time, 80 to 89 AD, talks about infancy, the angel annunciation, the census under Caesar Augustus. Now, it is important because some people don't know that it was actually the Caesar that declared or called for a census. And it's a very, very key part of the story that I think we often miss. Because if that census had not been called for, the prophecy in Micah 5:2 would have not been fulfilled. Just how God uses natural events to influence supernatural things, to bring about supernatural things. And then there's John's gospel. So Luke and Acts were written about the same time, right? Because I think, is it Luke that wrote the book of Acts? Oh God, I hope I didn't get that right. John primarily focuses on his divinity and crucifixion under Pilate, and we go down and everything. Then some folks who wrote about Jesus, I mentioned Josephus, a non-Christian historian, important. He describes Jesus as a wise man, was the Christ, and Pilate condemned him to the cross. He also says Jesus was a doer of wonderful works executed under Pilate, and that believers persisted. He's one of the people who mentions that there was actually James, the brother of Christ, not just a rando or someone who says brother of Christ as in brother in spirit or brother in Christ, but he was actually Jesus's blood brother. And in Antiquities 20.9.1, this is where he says it, and this confirms that Jesus was a known figure, because James, saying he was the brother of Christ, got him stoned in 62 AD. That means Jesus was a known figure, right? So let us examine some more. One of the things that sticks out as a sore thumb to me is Jesus' silent years. Permit me to call it that. We don't hear much about Jesus from 0 to 11. We see him pop up 12 in the temple, and then he vanishes. Nothing, no account, nothing at all. Right? So according to some beliefs, the reason why the neighbors, when Jesus came to Galilee and was doing wonders, and they says this is not the carpenter's son, it most likely points to the fact that Jesus also learns the trade. Because if Jesus would be known as the carpenter's son, it means he was hanging around his dad, who is a carpenter, and he can't just hang around his dad without learning the trade. So it's I think it's also I think it might also be I don't know if anybody has tied this to anything. Maybe it's just me reading meaning into it. I don't want to be eisegetical. However, what I want to say is that Jesus was hung on a cross made out of wood. Maybe it plays, maybe I don't know. No, no, there's something about him being a carpenter. There's a significance about him being born to a carpenter and then being crucified. He says he was hung on a tree, you know, being he was hung on a cross made of wood, and wood comes from trees. Maybe there's something, I don't know, maybe there's some significance. I don't know. If there's anything like that, please tell me. I would really love to know. Because it could have been a fisherman, right? It could have been a fisherman, and that would make sense because he's fishing men, you know, his disciples, they say, I'll make you fishers of men. That would completely make sense to me, oh, because the area too was, as much as it was a village, it was also a fishing village. No, that's another thing you people need to understand. It was also a fishing village, so fish was a big commodity. Being a fisherman meant that you're a big boy. If you caught fish, that is if you caught fish, right? So I don't know. Tell me if there's anything like that. Please tell me. Please tell me. So let's talk about, you know, I'm I'm just picking points. I told you I have a 10-page document. I don't want to sit down here and read the entire thing to you. Who knows, if I had read the entire 10 pages, you probably would have slept off by now. Anyway, one of the things that scholars debate is Jesus's ministry length. Some people place it between 1 to 3 years, from Mark to John, because there were three Passovers around that time. So it implies that there were 3 years. Most think Jesus began preaching in the late 20s AD. Not actually. I, One of the things I heard very early is that Jesus started 30 AD and finished preaching 33 AD. So it kind of matches. He started his ministry at 30, finished at 33, was crucified at 33, and so I, I don't know that. We don't know. It's still up for debate, right? It is still up for debate. One of the things I think is important about Jesus's life is that Jesus did not come to liberate people politically, right? He didn't come to liberate people politically. However, he wasn't against, he wasn't openly against politics, if you will. The one thing that we saw Jesus really explode about was the folks that were selling in the temple. And he, in today's day, would have carried Oraimo cord, but he carried Koboko Utali. Piaha Utali Nazuolu. He tear everybody. And that was the one thing, of course, because the temple is supposed to be a place of worship. However, I think why this point is important to note is because some people like me hide under the guise of religion and Christianity to steer clear of politics and civil obligations. And we have so beautifully framed it as political apathy. All right. Now, why I can understand why there is some apathy, or why young people, old people can become particularly apathetic towards politics. It's important to know that if you're a Christian, if you're a believer, your Lord and Savior did not speak against it. In fact, when people even talk about taxing, Nigeria revived, or what's the word? They passed into law a revised tax bill. I didn't really think or care about taxing. I'm not even making it. Anyway, my personal income is none of anybody's business. It's not even my own business, and as well. Forgive me. What I'm trying to say is, when it was time to pay tax, Jesus said, "Whose face is on the coin?" Because they were asking him, "Do we pay tax?" I think if Jesus was present here, we would still ask him the same question. Like, Jesus, see, oh, do we pay tax? Of course, we paying tax now in Nigeria. I don't know, but I'm not speaking about other countries, but in Nigeria, we're not seeing any tangible benefits to the tax. Back in the day, tax wasn't because they wanted to provide tangible benefits. It was more of a show, if I was to put it that way, a show of allegiance. It was more of a pledge to your pledge of continued support for the Roman Empire, right? So Jesus says, "Whose face is on the coin?" He said, "Caesar." And he says, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's." I imagine that people were quite upset because they expected him to be this revolutionary, but he wasn't. He wasn't a military liberator, and I think that was part of the reason. That's part of the reason why the the Jewish people said, "Hang him." Right? I say hang him, crucify him, hang him on the cross. Crucify him, right? Because here it says, at the Roman trial, after Jesus had sat with Caiaphas, the high priest, and they wanted to expedite the process and crucify him or execute him on blasphemy counts. But according to Jewish law, you can't execute anybody because they have a miraculous claim or something like that. So instead of that, they presented it before the Roman em- Empire as sedition. Like, this guy's creating an uprising, he go scatter all your plans. And so when Pilate questioned him, Pilate found no fault warranting death and even offered to release Jesus. During Passover days, there's more or less a president's pardon, if you will, a prefect's pardon. Like, okay, now it's Passover, let old things pass. Old things are passed away, all things have become new. Oh yeah, now make we release them. And the crowd said, "No, we have no king but Caesar." I think it's because they wanted some form, but that's not what Jesus came to do. Jesus was not, one thing you should know, Jesus was not a revolutionary. If you ask who was Jesus of Nazareth, he was not a revolutionary. He was not a military liberator. He was not a political commentator. He advocated for social justices, but that was not his title. He did not say, "I'm a social justice warrior," even though he advocated for social. I think it's important to note that he did advocate for social justices, for equality before God. You don't think yourself higher because you are male. You don't think yourself higher than a woman just because you're a man. That's silly. Every single being created under heaven is equal before God. He did advocate for that. He was not just a miracle worker, even though he worked miracles. He was the Son of God. He was also man. He was a man like you and me. I said at the beginning that he was of no beauty that we would desire him. But I would also say he was a fine man. Just like you look at yourself in the mirror and say, "I fine." I don't he knew. Of course he was fine because he's God, right? He was man. He was man. Now, while we can debate for years about his divinity, like I said, I have an episode on his divinity, I have an episode on miracles. While we can debate so much about his divinity, it's important to know that he was also man. There's a reason why the Latin is vera homo vera Dei, fully man and fully God. There's this verse of scripture that says we do not have a high priest that is ignorant to what we face. It means Jesus got hungry. Jesus felt sleepy. Jesus was tired. We saw him angry when he entered into the temple. I mean, you can call it holy anger, right? We saw him angry, he walked into the temple and saw them selling pigeons and fish and pomo, and he tear everybody. We saw him happy, if you will, riding into Jerusalem on the back of a colt, a donkey. I will say he was happy. We saw him sad when he came, John 11:35, and Jesus wept. He was sad. We saw him tempted. He was tempted with food. He was tempted by, now, every temptation is, all the temptations point to two things: appetite and power. And I think at a very, very fundamental level, and even at an advanced level, all of our temptations and desires boil down to appetite and power. You you cheat in a relationship, it's an appetite. It's an appetite thing. You are abusive, it's a power thing. It's a power trip, it's power struggle. You are corrupt, power. You launder money, power and appetite. You find yourself in places and on islands and in corners that you should not be, appetite. You stir up meaningless conversations and controversies, power and appetite, if you will. And both things are like the belly of the ocean. They are insatiable. Economics makes us know that human needs or human wants are insatiable. So how best to satiate or satisfy your appetite and your desire for power than to bask in the all-sufficient God, the unfinishing God, if you will, the God that cannot finish. You go back for more seconds, thirds, as much as you want, and he'll never run out. And what best way to seek power and to get power? Not power to do evil, but power to do good. Power to heal the sick, raise the dead, cast out devils. Power to do good. Say how Jesus was anointed and he went about doing good because God was with him. How best to rely on power from the all-powerful God. From the all-powerful God. So, yes, he was tempted. Said, turn this stone into bread. Said, man shall not live by bread alone. Knowing that our appetites are not enough to satisfy us. Satisfying our appetites does not satisfy us. But by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God, that the word of God is so satisfying. And even though, of course, our appetite is so large and so almost inexhaustible that we will never get enough of God. There's no flavor fatigue when it comes to God. There's no flavor. We don't get tired. There's no flavor fatigue. Hmm. 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 Oh. Yeah, there is no flavor fatigue when it comes to God. It says, throw yourself off of this place, for he will give his angels charge over you. I know I have the power. I don't have to use it. Okay. Let me combine both of them. Everything you will ever desire, I'm going to satisfy your appetite. Now, I'm going to give you the power to rule over all the kingdoms of the earth. It combines the both of them, power and appetite. And Jesus is like, oh, goodness me, this guy, you're tripping. Do not tempt the Lord your God. Get out of here, man. Butter Joe. So, you're so hung up on, while you're so hung up on the divinity of Christ, while you're debating, I mean, yes, he is divine. He was God in human form. It's also important. I think there's a reason why the Bible lets us know that he was a man. There's a reason, and it's so that we know that we are not alone. We are not alone. As the Liverpool mantra goes, you never walk alone. You never walk alone. I hope that was not a jump scare to you. Anyway, thank you for listening. I will see you on the next episode. I hope this blessed you. I hope you learned a little bit of something. I hope you even learned a little bit of history. I promised myself I didn't want to bore you with so much words, but I hope this has made you curious enough to want to learn more about the God you claim to serve and the Jesus you claim to follow. I'll see you on the next episode. Stay blessed, flip the switch and illuminate. Godavo. Deuce.